Bobo's back with you here at 3's End. Now I want to share a couple thoughts about, I'm trying to figure out a nice way to say this, but for lack of that, we'll call them blue suit politicians. These are the individuals in the Air Force that were careerists. Anything to get ahead. I'm sure we've all known the type. And I had more than my share of working with and for these guys. At any rate, I started to see these personalities evolve when I became an IP in pilot training at Advanced Air Force Base. A couple of individuals showed up in different flights. One of them, one of the first ones, was in my flight, and this guy would do anything to get ahead, and it was really obvious. He was not a class team player by any stretch of the imagination. He was just in it for himself. To the point one day, I don't know if I could stand it much anymore or not. I went over to a clothing sales store and I bought a set of General Stars. At that time, they weren't that much. And I brought them back to the flight room and walked up and put them on his table. And I said, "Here, kid." I said, "These are yours." I said, "You don't have to worry about it anymore. Just throttle back, enjoy the program, enjoy life for a little bit. You'll eventually get your stars. I know, I've seen your name on them. Give us some slack." Another time, came down off a flight with a kid, and he, again, was another one of these personalities. And I'd given him a good on a grade on a turning rejoin. And it was near the end of formation flying. It wasn't that big a deal. I gave him a good on this ride. Well, he came into my office later after our debriefing, and he knocked on the door and he asked if he could talk to me a bit. And I said, "Sure." I said, "What's up?" He said, "Well, sir," he says, "you gave me a good on turning rejoins, and the last time that I flew and I got an excellent on turning rejoins, and I'm coming up for an assignment." And he says, I don't know if a good would reflect regression." And I thought, you got to be kidding me. Anyway, I was kind of annoyed about that. I took the grade sheet and I said, "You got a point there." And upon reflection of how the actual turning rejoin went, I erased the good and I gave him a fair. And I said, "If we're going to show regression, let's make it really obvious to everybody." I said, "Now, if you come back in here carping about a grade, you know which way this is going to go." Never had any problems with that after that. Then, it was not too long after that, I was flying with a flight. It was November flight, their advanced. And they had a student named Doc. And I'd heard complaints from the other students about how he was always upstaging himself at the expense of his classmates. Now, when I add a new flight into my flight, I always briefed, help your buddies out. If you see somebody struggling, offer to help them. Bring them along. I said, you'll learn a little bit and you'll help that guy. And I said, last thing you want to do is isolate him because it's terrible to do that. I said, reach out and help them out. That was kind of my philosophy in that vein. But Doc was in it for himself, and it was really apparent, even when the students were picking up on it. So anyway, I saw that at the beginning, and I saw it at various times through my career. In the late 70s, I was at Randolph as a flight safety officer for headquarters ATC. And one afternoon, we're over at headquarters. They were briefing an accident to the 4-star. And it so happened that General Willard, Gary Willard, showed up. He was the head of AFISC, Air Force Inspection Safety Center. And he happened to be in town, so General Roberts invited him to the briefing, the out briefing of a recent accident we had had. And I did not know him, but I knew of him. So anyway, when the briefing was over, we kind of congregated out in the hallway, and General Willard was talking to a couple guys, and it was just kind of interesting to listen to him talk. It was really kind of insightful. So Mikey and I are standing there when J.P. Ralston walked up, General Ralston. Now, General Ralston was our IG at the time. So he walks up, and Willard looks over at him, and without skipping a beat, he says, "Well, J.P.," he says, "how are you doing today?" He says, "Who have you screwed over this week to get ahead?" Mikey and I we're going, holy crap, we don't want to be here. We started backpedaling out of that one. Ralston didn't say a thing, but Willard just kept drilling in on him. Later learned that both of them had been Thud pilots during the war. Gary was very instrumental in the development of the Wild Weasels, as it turns out. And Ralston, he was a piece of work himself. But anyway, be that as it may, I picked up on that. And then, maybe 5-8 years later, I'm down in the Auger Inn one night. Now, I'll say straight up, I probably had a few pops by this time. So I'm down in the Auger Inn, and who should walk in would be Doc from back in flight advance some years before. So he walks in, he's wearing a F-15 patch of some sort or another, and he's got a buddy with him, and he walks up to me, smiling ear to ear, and he says, "Colonel Holliker," he says, "how are you today?" And I looked over at him. "Doc!" I said, "How are you doing?" I says, "Who have you worked over these days to get ahead?" Well, he just got real serious looking at me then, but the funny thing to tell was, his wingman standing there could hardly contain himself. He knew exactly what I was talking about, so some things never change. Anyway, I'm giving you a little bit of a background here coming up through the story, if you will. Blue suit politicians. These are guys that would put their careers ahead of the mission and ahead of everything else. And the last one I ran into was my ADO at Randolph. And I did not get along well with him at all because I saw this very thing. I saw a reluctance in this guy to tell the whole truth to the wing commander. And if there was an issue, he would only tell the wing commander part of the story that would make him look good or reflect upon him. And then I heard some other things along the way that I just kind of despised. Not necessarily the man himself, but the way he conducted himself. As it turns out, I have another friend that was his roommate at OTS. And he told me, he said, "Bob," he says, "you would like this guy in a social setting, but he said it would be a real pain in the ass to work for him." And I saw one side of that proposition for sure. But he went on to become a 4-star, so who could argue with that? When 1985, 86 time frame came about, I was about to enter the squadron commander pageant there at Randolph. I was about to meet what they call the Hasty Hawk Board. And that's where they selected individuals for consideration to be squadron commanders. I got called in by my boss, Ron Shamblin. Now, I really liked Ron. And we worked together well. I was at that time I was the chief of Stand About. So Ron calls me in and says, "Bob, I'd like to put you in to endorse you on the Hasty Hawk list," but he says, "You've got these orders to C-141s." Well, I did. And he said, "I'd like to pull your assignment and make you a squadron commander." And I said, "Sir," I said, "I really appreciate that, but I don't know how good of a squadron commander I'd be." I said, "I don't know if I'd want to be one." I said, "I really just like drinking with them." Well, he kind of chuckled at that, and he kept badgering me and badgering me and badgering me. And I'd never had anybody come up to me like that. So finally, when it got down to I was probably within 2 weeks of leaving, he came in and he said, "Okay, what will it take for you to let me pull your orders?" And I said, "You know what? If you can guarantee I can stay in T-38s, let's do it." So he did. He called over to MPC, the Personnel Center, and they canceled my orders that afternoon. And to his credit, he did back me for for being a squadron commander. And that year, there were, I think the numbers were something like 29 of us that made the squadron commander list, and they only chose 11 out of those 29. So I was very, very fortunate to get a squadron. And after it was released that I had been selected for squadron commander, I got the 12th Student Squadron there at Randolph. Colonel Shamlin came into my office one day, shut the door, and he said, Bob, he says, congratulations. He says, you've got the squadron. He said, you're going to find out how many people really don't like you now. And I went, whoa, didn't sign up for that necessarily. But he said, unfortunately, he says, that's just the way it is when you get up into the senior ranks. I did not like that at all. I loved being the ops officer. You know, if I could be ops officer for life, for those of you that aren't familiar, in the movie Top Gun, the bald-headed guy that was more or less in charge of all the aviators was the operations officer. He's the guy working with the pilots and leading them by himself often. That's the guy I would like to be in my dream job, if you will. But anyway, Ron and I talked about that a little bit. He says, there are going to be people that want you to fail. And by God, he was right. There were, we'll just leave it at that. But like I said, I just despise the blue suit politicians because they wouldn't be clear with the boss. And a lot of times in staff meetings, I'd be sitting there listening to other guys. We'd be going around the table on certain issue, and I'd hear them say things that, where you coming from with that? This is the way it is. Of course, they got over to me, and I took it upon myself to sort everyone out. It was exhausting at times. But be that as it may, I did fine for myself. I enjoyed the squadron. I enjoyed working with the young kids, the young people. I enjoyed challenging them. I enjoyed sitting down, asking them questions that I'm sure they hadn't thought about before, about which direction they wanted to take for their careers and this, that, and the other. That was the fun part. And I'm thrilled today when I hear from one of them. So that being said, that's my take on blue suit politicians. And I'm going to tie knowledge, wisdom, blue suit politicians here in a couple more videos coming up very soon. So just bear with me here, and it's good to see everybody this afternoon. Bobo, base gear, stop.